Hello, I'm Tina Madison White with the Asheville View, and I am here with Kasem Mohsen, who is the founding partner at Equilibrium Impact Ventures and the manager of Venture Winston Grants. Kasem, how are you?
I'm doing really well, Tina. Thanks for having me.
Let me just start with, what is Venture Winston Grants?
Sure. So the Venture Winston Grants is a private-public partnership between the city of Winston-Salem and business leaders here in the local community. And what they've come together to create was this program that will allow us to provide $50,000 non-dilutive grants to 15 to 20 different startups. And we're focused on 3 specific sectors. So these are startups that are building the future of food and agriculture, startups that are building the future of aerospace and aviation, and startups that are building the future of healthcare. And this is important for our city here in Winston, because we have tremendous assets here in the city, some of which are underutilized, such as the local airport. So what we've come together to do as a community is identify where are those places that we can grow as a city, where are those sectors that we can really start to create leadership and innovation, and then how can we bring those folks into Winston-Salem to kind of help lift up the whole community. And then also in each of these sectors, we're partnering with industry companies, industry trade groups. So in agriculture, we're partnered with Dairy Management Incorporated, which is overseen by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And they're going to provide their tremendous mentorship and industry experience for agricultural startups coming into our program. And they'll be there every step of the way to provide not just mentorship, but also beta testing and first customers for some of these innovative products. In aviation, we're partnering with a consortium called AeroX that again has gotten basically free use of the airport here to test these new innovative, mostly unmanned drone vehicles, which can do amazing things, not just deliver your food, but also could deliver blood products to an emergency. Let's say you have a rural emergency and someone needs a special kind of blood. You can call that in and it can be delivered to you via drone right there at the site. That's already happening in other places in the world, and we can build that kind of innovation for the United States right here in Winston. And then finally, for healthcare, we're partnering with Novant Health, which is an amazing nonprofit. They have over 1,500 different physicians in their network. And again, they'll be right there to test and mentor and help bring these new products to market.
You've mentioned in a different context the Up Accelerator. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So maybe I could take a step back and talk a little bit about my background and kind of what I'm focused on. So I am the son of 2 immigrants. So my mother's from Puerto Rico. She actually moved to this country, one of 9 children, at 11 years old, didn't speak a word of English, and moved to the South Bronx. My father was a Palestinian refugee. Was born in Amman. His family was pushed out of the West Bank in the 50s. And then he came over to the United States on a scholarship to Rutgers University to study political science. And so they met in New York City. I was born in New Jersey. That's kind of where I come from. When I was very young, a baby, my father died. And so my mother, a nurse, was left to raise 2 kids on her own. So my entire childhood was spent at or below the poverty line. So I understand what that experience is. I understand what it is to depend on the kindness of others and on government programs. I get that. I still feel it in my bones. It colors and touches every experience that I have. Also being a Palestinian Puerto Rican with a strange name, I also understand what it's like to feel like the other, not just growing up, but over the last 15, 20 years of my career, being an entrepreneur and being in predominantly white spaces and spaces that were built by and for the majority class, mostly white males. Someone asked me in another interview if I could go back in time and talk to my younger self when I was just starting to be an entrepreneur, what would I teach myself? And I told them I would teach myself about white supremacy. And the reason is because nobody told me, there wasn't the talk. I didn't get the talk in terms of when you're going in to be a business person, here's how you're different, and here's how the systems were built. And you're going to struggle in these ways. And without that understanding going in, the struggles that I had to connect, to be successful in certain ways, to build relationships, to have my voice heard, I internalized all of that. So as a young man, coming up as an entrepreneur, I was asking the question, well, what's wrong with me? What is it that I need to do to be better or to fit in? Why are all these other people kind of moving ahead faster than I am? What's wrong with me? And if I had had the perspective going in that it's not an excuse for everything, you still have to work hard, you still have to be amazing, right? But keep in mind that these systems weren't built for you, and understand what those things are, what the levers of power are in terms of being successful. And then don't beat yourself up, right? Just kind of learn how to maneuver. And I kind of had to teach myself that. And just like growing up without a dad, I had to teach myself how to shave. I had to go online to figure out how to tie my first tie, you know what I mean? And that's what my experience was like in entrepreneurship. And so now that, I've been super lucky to, be successful in entrepreneurship, sell 3 companies, now I'm an investor, I'm in this amazing position to start to give back and to make sure that specifically entrepreneurs of color that are coming up through these systems get that talk. And not only get that talk, but also have spaces where they can speak with other folks who have had that lived experience, air themselves out, vent, speak in the way that they need to, but also get mentorship on here's how you play in these predominantly white spaces. Here's how you succeed in those spaces. Here's what you have to do and what you have to keep in mind. And don't internalize it. Don't beat yourself up. You've got it. You've got talent. You've got the background. You've got the idea. You understand your market. You understand your business, but you're working in a world that wasn't built for you. And that is very, very central to everything that I'm doing. So you asked about the come up, and I want to talk about that, but I want to talk about it in the context of my belief in terms of how we build equitable ecosystems, especially around entrepreneurship. And I truly believe that we have to do that with a side-by-side model. So, one of the downfalls and a lot of the harm that was caused with how we approached integration in this country after emancipation was the idea that, Black and brown folks need to go into these established white spaces to succeed. And again, they weren't given the talk. They weren't given, the resources to do that. And when they weren't successful, then they end up shouldering the blame for that. Over and over again, we've seen, specifically in the Black community, we've seen those communities build organizations and systems like HBCUs, Black Wall Street, all of these things where they've been really successful. When I talked to Aisha about her experience growing up, she looks back at her experience in a Black high school and having Black teachers as being fundamental to her success, because those Black teachers knew how to push them. They knew how to make sure that they're going to strive for excellence. They didn't take it easy on them, right? And so part of that integration ended up with lowering the bar in a lot of ways, which does a disservice to everybody. And it's not what we need to do. And frankly, it's not fair. So the idea is that if we want to build equitable entrepreneurship ecosystems, we've got to, yes, integrate experts from all different walks of life, but also in parallel, build these areas that are built by and for these communities.
White people, we have a lot of them out here in Western North Carolina.
I love white people.
And when we talk about issues like this, I find that even those who want to be supportive, they're not sure what they're supposed to do. Are they supposed to sit on their hands, get out of the way? What's the ask you would have of people who really want to help create a very vibrant minority entrepreneurial culture in Western North Carolina?
Sure. This is something I talk with my colleagues a lot about, and you're right. There's one urge to kind of be a savior, and then there's another urge to just get out of the way, and neither one of those is really productive. I say it tongue in cheek, but I actually really mean it. First thing you should do is hire Aisha Adams, an Equity Over Everything, to come into your organization and to help you do an equity audit. The reason I say that is there are wonderful, amazing, talented, brilliant people who have worked in these spaces for decades, from the first civil rights era on through today. and have seen things vacillate and move left and right, and have worked in Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies to make meaningful change. Have worked in government and academia and have seen what's going on in these spaces, and have built playbooks to not just make changes in these organizations, but to empower folks, empower white folks, right? Because if you look across the spectrum, the people you have in leadership are mostly white folks. So we can't have them sit on the sidelines. They have to be participatory, but they have to understand their power and their influence and the way that they can do it in a productive manner, and how they can do it in an inclusive manner. So the first step to being inclusive is to go find people who've been doing this work for decades, pull them in and leverage their brilliance and their knowledge and their know-how and their playbooks, so that one, you're not guessing, and two, more importantly, you're not doing harm. Because what I've seen in terms of D&I in corporate America, they're doing so much more harm than good, because they're tokenizing. You can look at a leadership page and the only person of color might be the diversity officer. And they're not funding, and then they're not supporting that person. Why? Because it's a checkbox, it's a performative exercise. That is not changing the policies and the programs and the procedures inside of that company. And folks like Aisha and her team know how to change the policies and programs and procedures. They know how to change the rules. They know how to have those discussions. And she lives and breathes that and does that every day. And so, I did that. I brought her into Venture Winston grants, and I had her do an equity audit. And I can't tell you the difference that it made in terms of, one, informing the predominantly white folks around me who are on my team of their power, empowering them to do something good. But two, just in terms of outcomes and seeing the types of folks that we're seeing apply, I can draw a direct line to what Aisha has taught us and the principles that she brings into organizations. So, don't think you can do it on your own. Go out and find people who know how to do it.
Oh, that's neat. Let me ask you, in Asheville, we're struggling with how to pursue growth equitably. And in our case, we have such a strong dependence on the tourist economy. There aren't many manufacturing, there's not a big manufacturing base here or high-tech base. There are some. But if you were consulting to the city of Asheville or to Western North Carolina, based on what you've learned in Winston, where would you, and focusing on the equity part of it, creating growth in sectors and populations that really haven't had the resources. Would you have any advice to offer?
Yeah, I can just offer from my experience, understanding that every market and every community is a little bit different. And the first thing I'll say is there's not a silver bullet. There's not one answer. If there was, I think we wouldn't have any problems, right? It takes an ecosystem. It takes a village. And so when I look at, I've been an entrepreneur really all over the country and all over the world. So when I look at places that are growing and thriving, especially in this new era where money is moving out of the West Coast, I look at places like Detroit. I look at Miami. I look at Raleigh-Durham. And I look at places like Winston-Salem, and what they have is sort of a range of things. One, they have an infrastructure of support. So accelerators, incubators, co-working spaces, CDFIs, et cetera, et cetera. But they also have a pipeline of talent that are coming from, world-class universities, HBCUs, community colleges. And not only do they have that sitting there, but they actually integrate with them. They talk to them, they work with them, they partner with them to make sure that, especially in communities of color or other communities that don't get the chance to even know that entrepreneurship is an option for them, getting to them in high school. One organization that I volunteered with this summer is called Soy Emprendedor. And they specifically get Latino children from middle and high school into entrepreneurship programs. They have them build a business. They put them through like a Shark Tank type experience. And you see these kids grow and you see them realize, I don't have to go work for somebody else. I don't have to, do what my father or my mother did. And I don't have, I have options. And one of those options is to have an internal locus of control. One of my options is to actually work for myself and build a business and build value and build communities. That's amazingly powerful. And you have to have collaboration with the high schools and the colleges to build that pipeline, and for communities that are normally underserved to give them that option of entrepreneurship. So I can tell you a lot of them don't know that that's an option for them right now, and it's never been presented to them. You also need funding, right? So you need active funders at every single stage of the life cycle. So idea stage, pre-seed, seed, Series A, on and on and on. That's one thing specifically in the South, when you get to Series A, Series B, and you're talking a company that needs 20 million to grow, 50 million to grow. We don't have that infrastructure right now. Part of what I'm working on is getting that to happen. But honestly, a lot of these companies, when they get to that size, you see them start going to Boston, New York, San Francisco, some of these other markets, because they have the infrastructure to invest that kind of money into one company. And so the South, I believe, needs to regionally kind of circle around this idea of how do we pull our resources to make sure that we can have these unicorn companies stay in the South and employ people in the South without having to go somewhere else, just because nobody can write a $50 million check. It's a solvable problem, but it has to do with capital flow. Having partners, commercial partners in the sectors that you want to build is extremely important. So you probably see success with food and beverage in Asheville because you have community kitchens, and you also have a lot of big companies kind of coming in, Anheuser-Busch, and it's kind of these big companies that are open to experimentation, that are open to innovation, and might actually be there to beta test or acquire a company that has some sort of innovative technology in food. So I think I've seen that in Asheville, and that's one of the things that I've seen in terms of being successful across sectors. If you're going to focus on healthcare, you got to have a healthcare network. You have to have hospitals and networks who care about innovation in healthcare and are going to be there to invest their time and to invest their money. And I think the last thing I'll say is you have to have a sense of community. And that sense of community has to include diversity and inclusion. And so everything I kind of talked about in terms of, yes, have the mainstream way of doing things, but also make sure you have organizations and spaces that can include these folks and kind of give them the mentorship and the talk to be successful in these other places. And that's all about building community. And so something we did in Winston-Salem is an asset inventory. And part of the Venture Winston Grants program, before they even decided on what sectors that they wanted to entice people to apply for, they just took a step back and they said, we've got some amazing things going on in our city, and not a lot of people know about it, and they're underutilized. So like I said, they've got an airport, they've got the North Carolina School of the Arts, they've got Novant, they've got Wake Forest Baptist, they got, on and on and on. Here are the assets that we have. How can we build around what we already do well? And what are the things that we have that are underutilized that we can start to sort of ramp up to make sure that when we do start to ask entrepreneurs to think about these different areas and these different sectors, that we've got a place to plug them in, because nothing is worse than underfunding an entrepreneur and then having them live in a space where they don't have anybody that can test their products. They're going to leave. They're going to have to leave. So thinking about the long tail and not just always, feeding the fish, but think about the lake, think about the environment, think about the banks and the ecosystem that's around them, because ultimately they're going to get into the deep water and they might drown there. So, we have to have an economic development way of thinking that takes into account holistically what things look like and what things are going to look like 10 years down the line and 20 years down the line.
Fantastic. Kasem, thank you so much. This is
Thank you, Tina.
really interesting. And
yeah, really great to meet you.
We will be watching you closely this year.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Bye. Thanks.